Begin the current Daf, Mesechtes Yevamos Daf Kuf Gimel, begins 6 lines down on top of the Yommi. The Gemara continues in the discussion from the Brisa in the previous Daf. We had introduced the Brisa because we were talking about what type of shoes are valid to be used for chalitza, and in that discussion we got into the discussion regarding socks. And we said, there seems to be a contradiction. We said, well, it depends what type of sock. If it's a sock made out of leather, then it would be a shoe. A sock made out of fabric, out of cloth, would not be. But in that Brisa, we mentioned some halachas, and now the Gemara is going to elaborate and explain who's the Tana of that Brisa. Shiz corresponds to Bakazich and Cheskel, turning to Daf Yomi, joining us for today's Daf. Some things we're discussing in today's Daf are, if the Yavam's foot has been amputated, what's called a Kab HaKiteya, can he still do Chalitza? The various shoes eligible for Chalitza. Sandal HaMuzgar, let's say the shoe was in quarantine because it had a nega, and in contrast to Sandal HaMuchlit, if let's say it was confirmed to be a nega of Tzaraz, the halacha would be different regarding the halacha of Kesusi Mechde Shireha, which we know that certain things it's like pulverized and it's not like it's has a measurement, which is the case by Sandal HaMuchlit, and that would be invalid simply because you don't have the measurement of a shoe. Mishamshi Avodas Kechab, and the difference between that which is serving the Avodah Zarah, like let's say you put shoes on this idol doll, in contrast to Takreves Avodah Kechab, which is like it was used in the worship of Avodah Zarah, which has a more severe halacha. So we begin the Daf Kuf Gimel, 6 lines down the top of the Yamin. We had mentioned in the Brisa, Kab HaKiteya, which is the block of the amputee, they're like a clog that he uses as his shoe, that the Brisa considered as a valid minal, a valid shoe for the halacha of chalitza. So Mani, who is the Tana of the Brisa? So says the Gemara, Reb Meir. It's like Reb Meir, where the Tana we learned in the Mishnah Masechta Shabbos. HaKiteya Yoitze, where Taisus and Rashi differentiating how they explain what does it mean, who is the Kiteya like, that where Taisus explains is that he'll make a shoe out of something that's not normally used. That's the halacha opinion of Reb Meir. We find this in Masechta Shabbos that he considers this piece, this clog that he puts his foot in, as a shoe, and therefore Hakiteya Yoitze, he says that he could go out on Shabbos, but kapshalai with his block, the Reb Meir. Whereas Rabbi Yisrael, so you see Reb Meir is of the opinion that even if this kiteya, this prosthetic that he uses, that it's valid as a shoe, you see that you could use this for chalitza, which very big machlokes Rashi and Taisus regarding, are we actually talking about someone that has his foot cut off and he's using the kiteya, or is actually someone else borrowed it? Because actually Taisus brings an opinion that you can't use someone that doesn't have a foot. It's actually referring to someone that borrowed it. But either way, to use such a shoe as a shoe, that's Reb Meir. Now, so the Gemara says, wait a second. But one of the other cases in the Brisa was Bampil Yishal Beged. The Sefer said that if you use a sock out of garment, out of cloth, it's going to be invalid chalitza. That's a Song Rabbanon. That's like the Rabbanon. Which again, Rashi takes to differentiate how they explain the question, but the Rashi says it is that they disagree with Reb Meir by Kab HaKiteya. They hold that's not valid, as we saw with Yisrael, you can't use such a shoe on Shabbos. Now, obviously, that because it's not a minal, why? Because it's not made out of leather. As Rashi explains, if you would think it's like Reb Meir, since Kab HaKiteya is a nal, is a shoe, so obviously, Van Elcha Tachash, what was the source that we said that a shoe has to be made of leather? It was from a pasuk, Van Elcha Tachash, we learned that, okay, Tachash is an animal that has skin, it's leather, and that's what a nal is made out of. Obviously, if you hold Kab HaKiteya, which is, let's say, the claw is made out of wood, obviously that it doesn't have to be made out of leather. So that Ampilya should also be a nal. So if you're saying that Ampilya Shabega is not valid, well, that's like the Rabbanon who don't hold like a Meir. So he says a little differently that since not usually, you don't usually use you don't make a shoe usually out of that. So do we care about what it's usually made out of or not? Either way, however you explain like Rashi and Taisus, the Gemara's question is that the Brisa seems to be contradictory. It's on the one hand, it sounds like Reb Meir that it doesn't have to be out of leather, and therefore Kab HaKiteya is valid. On the other hand, it sounds like Rabbanan who holds that no, it doesn't have to be made out of leather, and therefore the Pilya Shel Beged that is going to be invalid sounds like the Rabbanan who hold that it has to be leather. So Abaya says like this, says, but the Sefer Rabbanan, you're right, from the Sefer that says that the sock made out of a garment is going to be invalid, from that fact that it's like Rabbanan, then Reisha, the opening halach of Kab HaKiteya, Nam Rabbanan, also says like Rabbanan, who they hold that Anel Chatachash is precise, and therefore it has to be made out of leather. So then, wait a second. So Bereisha, it's how do you explain the opening halacha of kavikite that's going to be kosher when it's not made out of leather? You have to say it's b'mechupa or. You have to say that it's covered with leather, and therefore it's not difficult because since it's at least covered with leather, we consider it as a leather shoe. And therefore, it's valid. Problem is with this interpretation. Normally, Rabbi says to him, "Wait a second. But if let's say this kavikite, this cloth that the amputee uses, if it's not covered with leather, so what do you tell me Allah is going to be puzzle? Can you tell me it's like drabanan? Well, it has to be made of leather. So Yachi, if that's the case, Adonai said instead of the sefer when it's talking about the invalid cases, you recall the Bryce from top of the summit from the previous stop, where it was talking about cases that are valid and then those that are invalid. Instead of the sefer talking about what's invalid, is a sock made out of cloth that's going to be invalid? Of course, it's not a nal because it's not even protective a sock. So instead of saying a case of a sock, liflik b'dida, why didn't you say the chiluk, the differentiation in the kavikite itself? And tell me like this, but when did I tell you it's going to be kosher, it's covered with leather? If it's not covered with leather, it's going to be invalid, even though it's protective, it's still not going to be a nal. For sure, the case of a sock. So according to Abayim, it's like going like Rabbanan, and the reason why kavikite is valid because it's covered with leather, it's difficult. And why does Sefer say sock? Say even in kavikite itself, when it's not covered with leather, it's going to be invalid. Say Rabbi gives it the other way interpretation. It says no. Midiresh Remeir, from the fact that the opening halacha of kavikite is like Remeir, who says it doesn't have to be made of leather. Stephen Am Remeir, the same is also Remeir, which he does not hold that the tachash has to be precise because, like we say, kavikite is made out of wood and it's going to be valid. Even so, you could say that the sock made out of a garment is going to be invalid. Why? Because by the kav hakiteya megan, at least it's protective. So therefore, even though it's not covered leather, yeah, it's going to be valid because he doesn't hold that el chatachash is dafka. But the sock, loy megan is not protective, and that's why it's not going to be a nal. Not because it's not made out of leather. It's not like drabanan. It's all like Remeir, but it's just protective. Therefore, it's not going to be considered as a nal. So that concludes that, just explaining that who's the time in the Bryce, it was Remeir, but still he holds, even though it doesn't have to be leather like you see by kavikiteya, however, the sock's not going to work simply because it's not protected. Another halacha related, he says, the person who does chalitza, he has to push his foot down onto the ground when chalitza is being done, so that she has to pull it off that way. On that, the Gemara asks, Rabbi Shloimy says, Tanya, and this is the reason why I'm bringing it over here, is because this is the Bryce we quote on the top of the summit. It's the opening words of the summit. It's the same Bryce that we explained before, but it said, Bein Oimid, the chalitza can be done whether he's standing, Bein Yeshu, whether he's sitting, and Bein Mutter, whether he's leaning. Which, like Rash explains, generally when someone's leaning, it's not normal that a person has to have his foot pressed down on the ground. So why are you saying that it has to be pressed? He says, yes, say alone, you can be sitting, leaning, whatever you want, but at the end of the day, your foot's got to be pressed down on the ground, and therefore it's not a contradiction. Now, once we introduce Ameimer, the Gemara brings another teaching from Ameimer, a similar type of halacha. A person that his leg is inverted, and when he steps on the upper part of his foot. Like Rashi explains, the word lichasa is the word of lavachim, which is the flanks. In other words, that he doesn't step where generally the foot steps. His foot is inverted, so such a person lechalitz, he cannot do chalitza. Says Rashi, we learned in the Mishnah of Kuf Aleph that our kubel lamata is going to be ksheira, that beneath the knee is kosher. So what's the problem over here? Even though he's not stepping on the bottom, so says Rashi, no, there is where his foot was cut off. So you have the shaik. So it says me'al ragloi, which me'al ragloi is on top of the regel. You could do chalitza with the shaik, but here it's not regel. but Taisa has a huge disagreement with Rashi and says that actually the halacha of our kubel lamata is very different. We were learning always my kubel lamata and say that okay, if his foot is cut off, it's a amputee that okay, you can take off the shoe over there. The Ri holds that no, if a foot is cut off, you can't do chalitza. And kubel lamata just means saying if you put the shoe in our kubel lamata, then you can do it over there. But the guy's got to have a foot, and therefore, obviously, this halacha is not difficult because it's only got to be where you got to be able to put where the foot is. And the kavikitei, he says also, isn't that an amputee? He says no, that's a guy who borrowed the shoe of an amputee. But it's not going to be valid if a person's missing his foot. Like he says, b'kitei lo ari midi.
A guy cannot do chalitza.
Right.
What's the din?
Right, so we'll see different situations. You have to do yibum, then you have to do a get, whatever.
Yes, so the yibum and a get.
Yeah, if you want to get out that.
And otherwise you cannot get out otherwise.
Right, exactly.
You can never do it on a left foot.
If you can't do it, well, that's machlekes. We'll see. So the Gemara asks, "Omalei Rav Ashi Lamemer," says, how can you say that if a guy's foot is inverted that you can't do chalitza? But Batana in the Brisa, Smeichas Reglayim, which we mentioned in the previous daf, which are the foot supports. It's one of the cases that are kosher to do chalitza with that foot support. It's like his shoe. Says the Gemara, "Lav b'chalitz ba'iyu." Isn't it talking about that guy who drags his legs and his legs are bent that you're doing chalitza with his foot supports? And that's not, he's not walking on his foot on the bottom, he's walking on his flanks, on the shins. So why is it any different? That's the same thing. So the Gemara, "Lo no hu di'ovli la'achar." That's right, and the Re says exactly like this pshat in the Kavi Keteh. It says, no, that guy who has these foot supports gave it to this poor Yavam who has no shoes. He gave him his foot supports, who his feet are straight, to use for his chalitza and mechalitz. So it's not the guy himself who drags his feet. He can't do it because he doesn't walk on his foot. It just told me he lent it to the Yavam, and the Yavam is using it. That's what the case is talking about. Now, Amr Rav Ashi, the Gemara concludes this discussion that Lamaida Kama Meima, based on this teaching of Ameima, that if someone's foot is inverted, he cannot do chalitza. Labar Oiva Chalitz, Labar Kifa Chalitz. These two individuals, which the Gemara brings in Ma'ikon Chavema Beis, that they were both maspidim, they were famous eulogizers. That Rav Ashi asked them, "What are you going to say by my, hesped?" And he said stuff that upset him, and they were punished, and their feet got inverted, so they can't do chalitza because again their feet they're not walking in the normal way. It's not going to be considered ma'al ragli. Then the halach of the Mishnah we said, "Narkuva lamata v'chulu." So he said that if his foot, again the way Rashi explained, Taisus again has a whole different pshat, but if his foot was severed below the knee, chalitza is kshera. Narkuva lamala, if his foot was severed above the knee, chalitza is going to be psula. Now, on that, the Gemara asks for a minute. It seems to be contradicted from the following brisa. There's a pasuk in Shemais that says, "Shalish regalim tochad libashana." 3 times a year, you have to celebrate and come to the Beis HaMikdash. Now, the word regalim, besides being Yom Tovim, also means feet, legs. Prat says the brisa that's excluding the Bali Kavan. A Bali Kavan, the amputee who has a prosthetic that he walks with, is exempt from the mitzvah of coming to the Beis HaMikdash. So obviously, says the Gemara, that shoik, the leg, not the foot, is not regel, because you see that a Bal Kavan who has a leg, just doesn't have a foot, is excluded from the mitzvah of Re'iyah, because it says regalim. So when it says Ma'al Ragloi, that should exclude a Kiteya. How could you say that if his foot is cut at least beneath the knee, he's valid for Chalitza? Says the Gemara, you're right, Vashani Hacha, here by Chalitza is different because you have a ribui. Because the pasuk says that she should take off the shoe me'al ragloi, which sounds like there's something that's on the foot. What's on the foot is the leg, because it doesn't say b'chaltza nalim me'ragloi, take off the shoe from the leg. It says me'al ragloi, what's on top of the regel. You're right, the regel is the foot, not the leg. But now it's saying what's on top, which is the leg. You can take up the shoe up until the knee. If that's the case, so why, if his foot is, maybe his whole leg is amputated all the way up to the thighs, why is that also me'al ragloi? So he says, no, me'al from above, let me'al to me'al. Now it's on above, what's above? That's above. Has to be above. So Amar Papi says, wait a second, Shema no, we can infer from this, from the Mishnah that validates only beneath the knee, that high istavida, the ankle that separates between the shoik and the regel, must be that ad aranachas, that it goes all the way down to the ground, and that there's no other joint beneath it by the heel. Why? Because these are gedatim. If you would think to say that it separates between the shoik and between the foot, that would make the ankle me'al ragloi, v'shoik me'al me'al, and then the shoik would then be above. So obviously the ankle is considered as part of the foot. So no, even though you could say that it does interrupt, it is a little above, but called the since it's together horizontally with the foot, and it's not above it, so kakar dami has the halacha like the foot, and therefore you would still consider the shoik as me'al and not me'al to me'al. Now we said in the Mishnah, that if it's above the knee, then the chalitza is going to be possible. Again, either if it's amputated or like if you put the shoe above the knee, it's not going to be valid. But Masar Rav Kana asked from a pasuk in the Vada. It says in the pasuk regarding the teichacha, regarding the bad things that are going to happen, or b'shol yasa hayitzim mibin raglahu. And in the context of it, it talks about that, and the fetus that comes out from between her reglayim. Now, obviously, her thighs are also called regel because when the woman gives birth, it's from her thighs, and therefore you see that all the way up there, that's called regel. How can you tell me regla is only really the foot? You tell me ma'al is up until the knee. What do you mean? You see that the reglayim, mibein ragleha, a regel is a terminology all the way up to the top of the thighs. So Mabai says no. B'shosha kadas leila, when a woman is kneeling to give birth, and anyone who's been in the delivery room knows they have these spurs to hold on. She sticks her heels into her thighs and she gives birth. So the child is literally going up between her raglayim, because her heels are actually by the area where the birth is happening. So it's literally going up in ragleha. So it's not referring to the thighs per se, it's really the foot that goes all the way back over there, and that's how the baby's coming out. Okay, Tashma, I think we're trying to bring another rag on Pasuk Shmuel Beis. When it talks about Mifi Baishes, David HaMelech was all upset that he loy asa raglov, that he didn't shave off the pubic hair, and loy asa svamai, and he didn't trim his mustache, his beard. So he was unkempt, wasn't happy. But the one thing is that we see is that when it talks about his zikan hatachten, it says lo asa raglov. So you see, obviously, that the raglam go all the way up until there. So they want no lishna ma'alya. That's just a euphemism. It's an appropriate terminology to keep it clean, but it's not really the actual raglayim. Must bring another way. Puts Shmuel Aleph. So the Yavi Shol lahasach raglam. Shol came to cover his legs, which we call it mei raglayim. Mei raglayim is the water of the legs. Obviously, the bichayim, the thighs, are called raglayim because it's the water coming out from where the legs are. Obviously, it's all the way up there. So the Gemara says, no, lishma, it's just again the appropriate terminology. It's not really the regel, is really the foot. It's just it's something that's appropriate terminology. The Gemara says, Tashma speaking another raya pasuk in Shaftim, which told about Eglon, the king of Moav. It says, ach mesechu ragla b'cheder hamakira. But he was covering his legs by the cooling chamber. But again, it's talking about that urine, and it's talking about calling it reglayim. So the Gemara, no, lishma, again, it's appropriate terminology. It's a similar proof from a pasuk in Shaftim, in Sefer Shaftim. It says ben ragleha v'chulu, that, in which even though it says ben ragleha, it actually refers to between her thighs, because Sisra, that he had bee with her, and the reason why Yal was doing this was because she wanted to wear him down, giving him what to drink, and then having bee, and then she was able to kill him. But you see, it's called ben ragleha when he's having bee with her. Bia is on the top of the thighs, and you're calling it between the reglayim. So obviously, it's even above the knees is called regel. So no, lishma, again, it's just appropriate terminology, but the regel doesn't really go all the way up until there. Now, parenthetically, once we introduce this, it says there were 7 acts of cohabitation that wicked man had with this Yal on that day. Because remember, if you read the pasuk, it says, which we started reading the beginning just before, ben ragleha. But ben ragleha, between her legs, kara, he kneeled, nafal, he fell, shachav, he laid. Ben ragleha, kara, between her legs, he kneeled, nafal, he fell, basha kara, that which he kneeled, sham nafal, that's where he fell, shadud, killed. Now, as Rashi says, the word kara, nafal, and shachav are mentioned 7 times in that pasuk to say there were 7 acts of bia that she had with him. So the Gemara says, but she had pleasure from the sin. So what's the Gemara's question when it's asked? And so Taisa says, don't say that the question is, why wasn't she Moisei Nefesh? Because that's not a question, she's Karka Eilam. A woman is a passive player in this act, as the Gemara says elsewhere in Masechta Sanhedrin, like by Esther Amalka. Also, Taisa says, that can't be the question because he wasn't Ma'anasar. To the contrary, she actually seduced him to have him do it so that she could weaken him to save the Jewish people. So obviously the question wasn't she herself activated. It's not a question about being Moisei Nefesh. She actually went and intentionally did it. Now the Gemara's question is, why is the pasuk praising her so much? As we find that the Gemara tells us elsewhere, and the pasuk means Tevaydich Nashim. It's saying that how greater Yal was than the Imahis. Because the Imahis had Hanaf in the Bia, Yal was having no Hanaf in the Bia, That the Gemara is saying, what do you mean? She is menended from Naveir. And that's what the Gemara answers. No, she didn't have any anav in the bia. That's why her act was much greater than Zaveir Lishma, because called Tevas Shalasham. All the favors, the goodness of the wicked is continuing to base, meaning she's having an act of bia, it's seemingly a pleasurable thing. No, roy it's on tzaddikim. That's bad, it's disgusting for the righteous, because they hate the wicked. And the righteous is repulsed by that benefit, by that pleasure, and therefore it's not hana. Shlomo says a pasuk in Bereshis, when Lavan had a dream from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem told him, Yishamelcha, be careful, Pentadabim Yaakov, maybe you can speak with Yaakov, from good to bad. We understand. We don't want Lavan saying any bad stuff to Yaakov. His item, well, that makes sense. Why is Hashem telling him not to talk good with Yaakov? The Rebbe can infer from this that the good of the wicked is roy. It's also is bad for the righteous, and therefore Yal was not getting any hana out of this, and therefore that's why the pasuk praises are more than the Emois. Like Gemara says, Bishlam Hasim, it's not really the same thing like by Lavan. Because over there by Lavan, we could understand that Hashem didn't want him to say not good, not bad, because he might mention the name of the idol as he actually did in Bereshis Lamed Av. Why'd you steal my idol? So I don't want to hear you're good or you're bad. You start bringing in all this prasta, pretzes, or whatever. But over here, my ra'ika. What was the bad that she had when she had bia with Sisra? So why are you saying that? Oh, any good by the Rishonim is Rab by the Tzadikim by love, and I can understand because he's going to talk about these Sachin. But what's the problem with having bia with as it's still a benefit, it's still a pleasure? What's the problem that was considered Ra for Tzadikim?
Was she an Eshish?
What?
Was she an Eshish?
I'm saying the whichever one it is, but this
one of the.
I'm saying Aver Lishma, but I'm saying the point is even she's doing Aver, let's say, but it was done Lishma to save the Jewish people. The problem is the Gemara was asking, but why are you praising her? The Maisa she had a nog, something she enjoyed. You know, she went to save someone from the disco, but when she went in, she was having a good time. She was dancing a little bit, you know. So as shlach more than the Emois because they had a nog. So he's saying she didn't have a nog. What's he giving the ganze schlechte Zach? Someone says he had the kashadi by zuama because it injected into her the filth. What's the filth that sister was injecting? The Rabbi Yochanan says b'shosha b'nachash al-chavam, when the primordial snake was connected with Chava, Hitler ba zuama. So he injected into her this filth. And Yisrael, Shamdal Har-Sinai, the Jewish people who stood by Mount Sinai, Paskizumasim. So that filth was removed from them. But a non-Jew who didn't stand by Har-Sinai, Paskizumasim, and that zuama, that filth, is still in them, and therefore that he injected into Yal, and therefore that was something that was repulsive to her. That she had that, and therefore she was not having any hana whatsoever, and that's why it's roher eitzel tzadikim. Now the Mishnah said that cholza b'min al shena shaloi b'chulu. We said if you do chalitza with a shoe that's not his, etc., it's going to be kosher. So talking about when the Bryce elaborates on this halacha, how we know this, because although one of the psukim says na'aloi, his shoe, so only elanale, I would only know that the chalitza would be done with his shoe. Na'al shel kol adam minayin. Any person's shoe, how do we know it could be used? Tamalim, because it says another pasuk, na. It says just shoe, which is na mekamakim. Any shoe, because it says chalutza na. So the Gemara says, so what are you learning out from his shoe if any shoe could be used? Says the Gemara, because it's na'aloi haroi. It's the shoe which is fit for him. So na'aloi doesn't mean it has to be his shoe, but it has to be his shoe in the sense of that it fits him. By that will exclude if it's a big shoe that he can't walk with, it's too big. Or it's excluding a small shoe that it doesn't cover most of his leg. Because as Taisa points out, although we mentioned previously regarding the actual act of chalitza, it's enough to just remove most of the heel. That's in the act of chalitza, where all you have to do is reveal the heel. But in the shoe shaboy, in the cheptz, in the object of the shoe has to be big enough that it covers the majority of the foot. It's not enough if it only covers less than that. And also, uprat l'sandal hamasulayim also excludes the sandal, which Rashi explains. Misulayim means to say that it's missing from the heel. Taisa says sandal hamasulayim is actually a certain type of a sandal, and an interesting parenthetically Taisa brings in that you find that source in a medrash, which says what wisdom made a crown for its head, humility made akiv l'sulyasa, a heel for its sulyasa. which tries to prove from there that you see Sul Yasa is a type of a shoe, that it's the heel of Sul Yasa. Like it says, Reishish Chachma, Yiras Hashem, the head of wisdom is the fear of God. So the crown is Yira of Chachma. And Ekev Anava, Yiras Hashem, but the heel of humility is fear of God. Now you see how great humility is. Medrash has brought the three things are equivalent, is Chachma, Yira, and Anava. So I can say Anava is greater than Chachma. So on that the Rebbe says they're equal in the sense of that you can't one without the other. But the Anava, humility, is the greatest of them all. Yeah, that's parenthetically. But Akaponim, it's excluding a Salam Salim She'ino Ekev that does not have a heel, that those are the cases that we're excluding from Na'aloi. But yes, it could be anybody's shoe, but again, it's got to be a shoe that is fit for him, and that's what Na'aloi is coming to tell us. Now, the Gemara brings a story related to this, that Abai Avakoi come into Rabbi Yosef. Abai was in front of Rabbi Yosef. I saw Yevamos Daf, a woman who, her husband died without any children, came into Chalitza. So Amalei, so he said to him, Havli Sandalach. He said to Abaya, give me your sandal for the Yavam so that he could do Chalitza. So Yavli Sandalach is smaller. So Abaya deliberately gave him his left sandal, because Abai didn't hold that you're initially allowed to use a sandal that's not yours, meaning we have a ribui that includes even though it's not your own shoe, but that's only with the Evid Abai held, but like a chila person should use his own sandal. So to like show him that he was displeased, he gave him his left sandal. So Amalei Rabbi Yosef said to him, when did the rabbi say in the Mishnah that if you use the left shoe with the right foot, that's going to be about chalitza, meaning because I'm going to do it on his right foot, because that's like a tchila one, but you're giving me your left shoe. When did the Mishnah say that that's okay? That's the evidence after the fact. Like, did they say that initially? Why give me your left shoe? So Abai said, if that's the case, if you're concerned about the evidence like a tchila, well, nami. So when someone's not using his own sandal, when Rabbanan say that, it's okay. It's the evidence after the fact. Like initially, did they say that? So Rabbi said to no. This is what I was telling you. I was telling you, give it to him and be maknet him, acquire it from him, that it should be his and that you should gift it to him. Maybe I'm a nasla hagza, but gift it to him, and then it's going to be his shoe. I wasn't telling you just to lend it to him. It said in the Mishnah that sandal shel eitz, a shoe made out of wood, is going to be kosher. So the Gemara says, Man Tana, who's the Tana of the Mishnah that says that a sandal shel eitz is going to be valid chalitza? Amashmu is Jameir, who he said, as we quoted this in Amid Aleph, the Kavai Kiteya, that a wooden clog is a nal that you could walk out with it on Shabbos. It's not like the Mishnah Masechet Shabbos, like Kiteya, an amputee, Yoitz B'Kapshel, could go out with his clog. This is the Remeir. The Yisrael says the same. So you see, Remeir is the one who holds, and a wooden shoe is considered shoe. Whereas Abu Dishmul Amar, says no, it could even be Mechupa, or it could be that it's covered with leather, and therefore the very clog could be like everyone. Like we said, that's going to be considered a shoe, even according to the Rabban who disagree and hold that a Kavai Kiteya is not, but if it's covered with leather, then it's considered as a shoe. Now, continuing on this theme, Amar Papi Mishmei Derava, he says sandal hamuzgar. What that means to say is, like, let's say you have a shoe that you found some tzaras on. So what you first do is you put it in quarantine because we don't know what its status is yet. So such a shoe, lay tachlis by. During the days of hezger, of quarantine, you should not be doing chalitza with it because we don't want you to do it with a shoe that has already confirmed tzaras, which is a muchlat. Now, if you did do chalitza with this quarantine shoe, chalitza it's going to be a valid chalitza because a quarantine shoe doesn't have to be burnt, and therefore it has the measurement of a shoe. But sandal hamuchlet, if let's say it was confirmed to be a case of tzaras, you cannot do chalitza with it. If you did chalitza, it's going to be invalid. Why? Because it has to be burnt, this tzaras. Now, we need a certain measurement in the shoe that it covers the majority of a person's foot. The halacha is when you have something that's going to be burnt, it's what's called kesuse mechta shereha, is that we view it as if it's pulverized already because of the fact that when it gets burnt, it doesn't have any substance. So it's like it's not there. So even though you have a shoe, it's like it's not, you don't have the measurement of the shoe, and therefore it's going to be invalid even after the fact. That's Rav Papi. Rav Papa, however, he disagrees. He says Mishmei Derava. He's also in the name of Rava, a different version. He says no. If it's quarantined or confirmed with tzaras leitachas, well, you're right. Initially, you shouldn't do chalitza with it. But if you did chalitza, the chalitza is going to be valid. That's the machlik, is if it's valid after the fact or not. Now, Meisver, the Gemara asks on Rav Papi, who said that it's going to be invalid from a Mishnah Masechtas Negoyim. Mishnah says, Bayis hamuzgar. If you have a house that's quarantined, that we found a nego, it wasn't confirmed yet. The halacha is metama mitoichai. It contaminates from the inside, which Rashi explains means when you touch, meaning even if the person's whole body did not go in, that it should be tamei because of habal labayas. But if he touches the wall, he becomes tamei. And muchlet, on the other hand, is more severe. The house that's confirmed as tzaras is going to contaminate even not only mitaychai from the inside, but also me'achayr from the outside. Now, both the house that's quarantined and confirmed with tzaras is metam b'biyah. If someone enters a normal way of entering, once the majority of his body goes in, he's tummy because the pasuk says about bala bayis. If you come into the house, we learn from Sukkim and Teres Kainim that a musgar, even a quarantined house, contaminates from the inside, not from the outside. Now, by the muchlet, it says tamehu, which adds on another tumah to say that's going to contaminate from the outside. So again, they both have a tumah when you enter, but regarding touching, that the musgar is only on the inside, and muchlet is going to be even from the outside. Says the Gemara, if you're telling me that when you have a tzaras that's muchlet, that's confirmed as tzaras, you view it as if it's pulverized, as if it's not there, as if it's ashes already. So how could you tell me that when you enter into the bayis muchlet, you're going to become tamei? But v'bin v'bala bayis, you need to have it coming into a house. But lucky you don't have it because it's pulverized, because you have to shatter it. Says, Mo, you're right, good question. But shattering there is different because the Amakar, the pasuk says in Yikra, v'nitats es habayis. It says that you have to shatter the house, which tells you even when you're shattering it, karubayis, it's called a house. So you can have a bala bayis because it says v'nitats es habayis. Obviously, then it's still considered a bayis. So to qualify for bias, it's going to have that, even though it's a muchlet. In contrast to over here, by the sandal, they don't have any special ribui, and therefore you're right. The sandal ha-muchlet is going to be possible because it's ksusim echta shira. I'm going to try to bring another raya, not like our papa. He touched him out from a brisa. The brisa says that matris, regarding a cloth, a garment that has a negav tzaras, sheyesh b'shalosh al shalosh. If it's 3 by 3 finger breadths, which is the minimum, the smallest garment that's fit for tumah because it's fit for 4 people. So even though it doesn't even have an olive's volume worth of thread, because Rashi said the threads are very thin, so it could be 3 by 3, but you don't even have a kazayas worth of thread. But once the majority of this cloth goes into a pure house, timasahu, it contaminates all the vessels in the house. Because the mitzayra contaminates when he enters into a room, and so too the garment that has tzaras and the stone that has tzaras, they all contaminate when they go into an oil. Now, over here, once the majority of the garment went in, it's like all of it went in. But one thing wants the Gemara to say, my love isn't it talking about by muchletes, it's talking about where the garment is confirmed as having tzaras. And even so you're saying that you'll say that the minority of the garment that didn't enter is considered part of the majority that went in. And as if all of it went in. The problem, says Rashi, is that if you're saying command the mechasasadamya, then you should go after what entered. And you don't have in the house 3 by 3. Because for some reason that it's like, because ksusim eftis, you can't consider like as if it's even there. So if it's there, fine. But like to say that you're going to say that the meat is busted the rive, how are you going to say that? You don't really even have it really, maybe virtually. But therefore, I shouldn't say shadi muta basaruba because of the fact that it's a muchlet. Which the Gemara says, no, he's not talking about a garment that's muchlet. It's musgeches. It's not a garment that is only quarantined. It's only suspected. And therefore, it's not ksusim eftis. So you'll go shadi muta basaruba. The Gemara says, if that's the case, wait, you must say, look at the next case. The Brisa says, let's say the other way around. Let's say actually, that garment had many olive volumes worth of thread. But it's still only 3 by 3 finger breadths because Rashi says because the thread is actually thick. So if it's thick, it's only that much of the measurement, but it has a large volume of thread. So it says the Brisa, as long as a X volume of it went into the pure house, to masahu, it's going to make the house, whatever the garment's inside, tamei. Now, even though you don't have a beged, because even the majority didn't go in, it's only kazayas volume of it that went in. So says the Gemara, if you say that this garment that we're talking about is a confirmed tzaras garment, so I could understand that it contaminates even with just an olive's volume worth, even though you don't have a garment of 3 by 3 because it's muchlet. So what about the fact that it's muchlet? Oh, because the iskish lameis. A confirmed tzaras is compared to a dead person. And a dead person contaminates in the shiur kezayis. Now, where do we have such a hackish? So Rashi brings, because it says, Al Nosahi Kameh, so one of the parashas coming up, that she should not be like a dead person, that Miriam was muzgeres. She was quarantined, and Aaron was saying to Moshe, let her not be confirmed as a Mitzayra, because then she's going to be like a dead person. So just like a dead person contaminates the kezayis, so too a muchlet of tzaras would contaminate the kezayis. But if like you're trying to interpret the brayso, so that's talking about that it's only musger, why would you be comparing it to a mace? Why would it have the tumah of only kezayis going in? So Rashi has the girsa should have the word ella. So rather, truth is we're talking about muchlet. However, so then why am I saying that I'm going to drag the minority after the majority regarding tumah, and I don't say command the nechtes tameh as like it's not even there? Kashani Hasim here also you have a special rebbe. The pasuk says b'sar v'sabeged that this garment that has saras you have to burn it, which tells you for the b'shas treivakar beged that even during the time of the burning it's considered beged. But again, that's different for our halach of chalitza that we don't have a special rebbe, and therefore if it's a nal muchlet, then again it doesn't have the shiur and you can't use it even with the evid for chalitza. The Gemara says why not? Why don't you learn out for chalitza that from these halachas that you see that even when it's kesusim mechtes, is considered like it has the shiur, and it should be considered intact. The halacha of chalitza, which is prohibitory law, cannot be learned out from these halachas of tzaras, which are halachas of tumah, which as Rashi brings, as the Gemara tells somebody in Sukkah, the tumah is a chiddush. The halachas of tumah are novelties, and they're not necessarily logical, and you cannot learn out the halachas of Isra and tumah, and therefore, the halacha is going to be that chalitza muchlid is even b'diavad not going to be valid. Now halachically, Amar Rav he concludes that his halacha is like this, which once he mentioned halacha introduces this one and other halachas related. Echad sandal hamuzgar, whether we're talking about a quarantined shu, v'echad sandal shamucha, whether we're talking about a shu that is confirmed with tzaras, v'echad sandal shalavetz kechavim, whether we're talking about a shu of idolatry. Now, what does that actually mean? So Rashi says, what that means to say is that you have the tzelem, you have this doll, that's their avodah zara, and they would put shoes on this idol on its feet. Because when they would transport it from one place to another place, they wanted it to have shoes. So that's what it's saying, all these halachas, these types of shoes, leitach, let's look at chillah, one shot use of chalitza, but from chalitza, one did do chalitza is a ksher. The chalitza is going to be valid. So why is this? So Rashi explains. The case of muchlet, of when it's as a confirmed tzaras, didn't we just say that that shoe is not going to be valid with the evid? No, because we brought a parallel in the laws of Tumah that even when it's being burnt, it was called a beged. And Rashi explained, but didn't we say you can't learn out Isura from Tumah? So Rashi explains that's not considered melef. You're not really learning out that you're saying you can't learn out chalitza from the laws of Tumah because it's gila milsa ba'amahu. That's how Rava holds. It's just revealing to us a concept. It's not really learning out. So therefore, it is a shoe even when it's quote unquote kasusi mechta shudah. Now, the shoe of the idol also because since it's meant when it's being transported. So what it is it's just misham shevayiskacham. It's just serving the idol. Therefore, it's not going to be burnt because it's not takrevis of desire. It's not worship. It's just something that you pack it when it's traveling. So you could fix it with doing bittul. As Tosfos explains that there's a difference between if the avodah zarah is owned by a Jew or a non-Jew. Whole Aricha says that. But since it's a non-Jew's avodah zarah, it could be fixed by the nullification of the idol. And since you could, so therefore it's not considered like as if it's pulverized, as if it's Yisur no. It is Yisur no itself, meaning it is prohibited to have benefit from it. So how can you do the chalitza with the idol shoe? Can't have a no from Misham Shabbat Zara. Says Rashi, chalitza is not considered having a no. Because mitzvahs lav lahanas nenu. When you do a mitzvah, it's not considered having benefit, so therefore there's no problem after the fact of using the idol shoe for the mitzvah of chalitza. Now in contrast, says the halacha shall takrebis of etzkachavim. In contrast, if you use what was sacrificed as a gift for the idol, which the Gemara tells us that the sacrifice of the Zar cannot be nullified. because the takrebis is compared to a dead person, like it says, which is like the sacrifice of the dead. So therefore you can't fix it, and therefore if you can't fix it, it is like it's pulverized. And so it is contained of kavdam and alf. Similarly, if you have the majority of inhabitants of a city that's did have a zara and they get killed out, everything there has to be burnt. So again, it's also l'sreifa. Therefore, it's also kesus mechta. And also b'shal zaken when you have an old man that this shoe is being made for his dignity, meaning for tachrichim, for burial shrouds. So since it's not meant for walking, it's also not a nal. So all these cases like tachas, one should not do chalitza with these shoes. The chalitza is going to be invalid. To which the Gemara has a question. Only Rabbi Ravashi says, what's the difference between this old man's shoes that you make him special burial shoes? That is not valid because the lavli lucham is not meant for walking, so it's not a na'al. The beidin nami, the shoe that they have in the courts, meaning that old cobweb shoe that they have, which they have, the chalitza shoe, there's the chalitza, come, everyone come, let's see what's going on over here. They take it out from the closet and they have to take off the cobweb. So also lavli lucham is not meant for walking. When's the last time anyone walked with that piece of board with that straps over it? Who's taking a walk? Why is it any different? Why is it valid? So Amalei says to him, no, if the agent of the court would take a walk with it, be covered alai diyana, would the judges be particular about him? In other words, basically they're saying that it is meant for walking. And the guy could take the shoe. If let's say some guy comes to work one day in the Bezdin and he can't find his shoes and he takes it, he would walk with it. In contrast, the one for the old person, no one's allowed to use it. It's meant for his burial. It's got to look pure white and everything. This and that. That's the difference between the one on the Bezdin and the one of the dead person. Therefore, that would be okay and that one wouldn't be okay. Thank you to any time. Those things.
Why don't they discuss